I don't know how many games the Hawks are going to win this year, but one thing I do know is that Jalen Johnson is going to be really, really good. You've probably seen him throw down some insane highlight dunks over the last couple of years, but there's a lot more to his game than that, and honestly, he's probably able to do a lot more than you realize. With the Hawks seemingly going back to the one guard model with Trae Young after trading away 𝙖𝙗𝙤𝙪, I think Jalen Johnson is poised to have a breakout season for Atlanta. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with Jalen Johnson, he was the 20th overall pick back in the 2021 NBA draft out of Duke. And honestly, he was kind of just lurking in the background for his first couple of seasons, only playing in 22 games his first year, averaging 5.5 minutes per game, and only 15 minutes per game his second year. But that was until last year. He went from averaging 5.6 points per game in 2023 to averaging 16 points per game in 2024, 4 rebounds to 8.7 rebounds, and 1.2 assists to 3.6 assists. His production has more than doubled in every major box score stat, and he's been rapidly improving throughout his 3 seasons in the NBA. And don't get me wrong, there are other guys his age with more impressive box score production, but believe me when I say that it goes a lot deeper than just the stats. Obviously, when you're playing alongside a heliocentric guy like Trae Young, your responsibility is going to be active off ball and allow him to create easy offense using his on-ball scoring gravity. This is where Johnson's screening instincts come in really handy, being able to set Trae up for a pick and roll, but knowing Trae usually commands some pretty aggressive pick and roll coverages, Johnson's able to slip into this open space so that he can capitalize on the advantage that Trae created. Now, even after he runs into a packed paint, he's able to methodically take the dribble, he checks for that corner pass real quick, and then when the defense thinks that they've stopped the advantage, he's going to catch them sleeping with this really slick fadeaway jumper. Anytime that Trae draws 2 defenders, Johnson is able to get the ball with space to move downhill, and this is where you really start to see his crafty finishing open up. And sometimes if you give him too much space, then he'll just get going downhill and take off from well outside the restricted area so that he can rise over the defense and throw it down. Him and Trae are a pretty dynamic offensive duo together, and if we look at the minutes last year where Trae was the primary ball handler with Johnson on the floor with him, they clocked an offensive rating of 119.6 points per 100 possessions, which was in the 81st percentile in the NBA. And while his ability to operate as the pick and roll big man out of the power forward position is exciting, one of the most exciting emerging aspects of his game is his perimeter shot. While he only shot 35.5% from 3 last year, which is still well below league average, if you look at how well he shot on his 180 catch and shoot 3-point attempts last year, it comes out to a much more respectable 36.7%. And given that last year was his first season attempting a meaningful volume of threes, I expect that 3-point efficiency to continue to rise. But this is actually really important and ties into some of the stuff we were talking about with him as a screener, because this gives him a lot more versatility, allowing him to catch defenses off guard when screening for Trae in the pick and roll, because not only do they have to worry about him slipping into open space, but with the threat of his shooting, they now also have to worry about him popping to the perimeter and getting an easy open look. Now, all of this stuff is great, but it's complementary player stuff. It's cool, every team needs it, but it doesn't exactly scream star caliber player. But there's more. Those of you that have watched Jalen Johnson play, you already know that he's way more than just an off-ball player. In fact, I'd argue that the most exciting parts of his game show up when you give him more opportunity to create as an on-ball guy. Jalen Johnson's got a really exciting mid-range game that I think we've only scratched the surface of. He's great at getting into the middle of the floor to get his defenders flipped, and you'll see him go to this spin move to get his defender basically turned all the way around, and then from there, he's able to seamlessly flow into these fadeaway jumpers. He's got really good footwork when he gets himself into the paint, but what's really interesting about him is that even though he finds himself in a really awkward spot against Paolo trying to take an off-balance shot, he's coordinated enough to use his left hand on the shot to keep Paolo from blocking it, and he's able to get it to fall. Now, this would be insignificant if he was left-handed, but he's right-handed, and he does a lot of this ambidextrous kind of stuff. And even though he's a right-handed shooter, he never really looks uncomfortable when he's creating with his left. He shot 51.1% on 47 mid-range jumpers off the dribble last season, and that was a rate that put him well above league average. Now, the volume isn't exactly through the roof, but it's high enough that you can start raising some eyebrows at it and being intrigued by the possibility of it becoming a bigger part of his game. I don't anticipate him being a high-volume perimeter scorer off the dribble, or even even necessarily a high volume driver, but this mid-range scoring ability that he has makes him really unpredictable for defenses to figure out. They can't really overplay the possibility of a mid-range look because then he can of course just get to the rim. But if they focus too much on stopping his drive, then he can just stop and rise for easy jumpers that he hits at a high enough rate that you have to worry about it. But believe it or not, this still isn't the part of Jaylen Johnson's game that I'm most excited about. I think his playmaking is what really sets him apart from your standard power forward. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call him some elite playmaker, but I think he's the perfect blend of connective passing mixed with solid playmaking ability. He's not just a guy that's going to be making the extra pass. He can do that, but he really takes things a step further. He can take advantages that are created by other players and continue to develop them to generate extremely high percentage looks. Let's look at this play for an example. Like I mentioned earlier, Trae gets a lot of defensive attention up top, so Johnson can end up in these simulated short roll opportunities. The defense has the pass to the middle cut off, but when Bogdan gets it to him near the free throw line, he recognizes that Capella has a mismatch on Devin Booker, so Johnson just throws it up to Capella for the easy slam. Again, Trae draws a double way up high in the half court, so Bay's gonna lift a little bit, bring man higher up, and open up the space for Johnson to flash at the nail for Trae, and this prompts Plumlee to step up, and instead of getting disrupted, he just makes the easy pass to Okongwu to throw it down. So not only can he score out of the short roll like we looked at earlier, but this scoring ability forces defenses to pay closer attention to him, and it opens up a ton of opportunities for him as a passer. He can also do some creation as the ball handler in the pick and roll, and again, you'll see how the fact that he can get by one defender and force help from a second allows him to create easy looks for whichever big is on the floor with him. And if teams are sending the help off the weak side corner, he's shown flashes of being conscious of that and capable of hitting the skip pass to the weak corners for easy looks. But then you still get some of the more traditional big man stuff that he can do, like setting up DHOs to give guys space to get going downhill. As an offensive piece, you get a lot out of a guy like Jalen Johnson. He doesn't need the ball in his hands at all times, but you can trust that when the ball ends up in his hands, he's going to make something good happen. To categorize him as just another supporting piece would be a little bit inaccurate, and I think he's closer to being capable of operating as a second star than he is to just being a high-value role player. In the 2,434 possessions where Jalen Johnson was on the floor with Trae last year, he scored 16.2 points per 75 possessions on 60.8% true shooting. And while that's pretty solid production as it is, I think his scoring is going to take a big jump this year now that he's probably going to take on a more significant offensive load. And I haven't even mentioned his defense yet. Even though Atlanta has struggled defensively over the past few years, there is so much to like about Jalen Johnson's defense right now. He's projecting to be an incredibly versatile defender, and versatility is really kind of a common theme with him. He's mobile enough to hold his own against ball handlers and force them into difficult shots, but he's also got the size and strength to hang with bigs. He moves his feet really well for a guy that's 6'8", and he's good at understanding what a ball handler is likely to do once he gets them to pick up their dribble, so he doesn't have to overcommit to a shot and end up getting left in the dust. He does such a good job of making himself big, which makes it difficult for guys to figure out a good angle of attack when they're matched up on him. He only allowed 0.7 points per possession when defending in isolation, which ranked in the 91st percentile in the NBA last season. He's legitimately an elite 1v1 defender. He's got good defensive instincts as well and can occasionally rotate over from the weak side to catch guys by surprise at the rim. And if you watch him long enough, you're bound to see him nab one of his highlight chase down blocks. I genuinely cannot say enough good things about Jalen Johnson. I don't know if A, the Hawks will have the success necessary, and B, he'll have the box score to get into all-star conversations, but I really do think that he's going to break onto the scene this year as Atlanta's second star. Johnson is poised to take the leap from promising young role player to being a genuine core piece of Atlanta's long-term success, potentially as a star. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, as always, consider leaving a like and subscribing. It seriously helps me out a ton and allows me to continue making videos like this. Regardless, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.